This is the Bold City Podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Bold City Podcast. I'm Jason Masters, the lead pastor of Bold City Church, and I have a really important guest with me today. One of my most favorite people in the whole world, Ron Luce, is here, all the way from Texas.
That's right.
Where you got the best barbecue in the world.
That's what they say. Everybody says that, though.
Yes, they do. Really quick, I'm just going to introduce our listeners to us, as in how we know each other and stuff like that. Newsflash, Ron actually led me to the Lord when I was 16 years old at an event in Tampa, Florida. He was preaching. He had this super cool mullet, and I think it was anointed, and he preached a phenomenal message. Holy Spirit was there. My life was changed, and then went and served under him and his team in a ministry school for a season. And for the past 2 or 3 years, man, we got reacquainted, and Ron has been huge help with church, with my marriage, ministry, family, youth ministry as well. And so it is a big honor to have him and to have his voice in my life. And I thought it would be incredible for the men of our church and whoever else listens to this, maybe hear a really cool conversation between the two of us. So thanks for giving us the time.
Great to be with you, Jason, and excited about what's going on with the men at Bold City. You've told me all about the 80 men, and they're just tearing it up, reading, doing homework, and coming together. And finally, there's somebody that cares enough about men to raise them up and challenge them to be men. You know, too often it's been seen, it's sort of like, if you're a Christian, you're a guy, you're wimpy or whatever, rather than understanding Jesus was the most authentic man that ever lived. He's the definition of manhood. And those guys that followed him, he was throwing it down, man, like expecting them to rise to the occasion. And so when you hear a coach that throws down like, you're going to sweat blood, you're going to eat bullets, and something about that causes the team to rise up and come together. That's exactly what happened with the disciples. That he's like, eat my flesh, drink my blood, you have no part of me. He said, give your all, take up your cross, follow me, get ready to die for me. And something about the disciples, they rose up and they said, this guy is worth giving our all for. And for too long, Christianity's been perceived as the limp-wristed sort of you're not really a man, you're kind of a girly guy and all of that. And that's just basura. It's garbage,
Yeah, we call that bull crap in the South. You can say it on this one, all right? Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's one thing that I thank God for men who are leading in the church now, that, doesn't make, following Christ make us look like, tissue paper. We are not soft. Like it is hard to lay your life down and to take up your cross, deny yourself, right? Like that stuff is not easy, but it's amazing. I think one thing that I learned from you early on when I was a late teenager, and I think that kind of really compelled me and inspired me in my walk with Jesus, is guys like you always turned it into a battle cry. Like, hey man, God has called us to be on the front lines of spiritual warfare and seeing his kingdom advance. Like, it's not like something we're just sitting over in the corner. And it's like guys like you always portrayed it as like this great adventure. Mm-hmm. And I think it's huge. I think if we don't do that for men, I think we're robbing them of something.
Right. Well, men need an adventure. They need something to throw themselves into. Too often what happened in the church is we got our definition of what it means to be a man from Hollywood. So if you don't look like Rocky, then you're not a real man. If you're not a womanizer, if you can't get 1 million women to have sex with you, you're not a real man. All these things that Hollywood portrays. Of course, those guys are all fakers because, they all got diseases or they're alcoholics and they've got no family and they're lonely and all of that kind of stuff. I just heard a study that says that said 2/3 of the people who won the Academy Awards for Best Actor, Actress slumped into alcohol abuse and depression. So here they are faking, pretending. They're really good at pretending. That's what the Academy Awards are. They give you an award for pretending. And then what we do is we perpetuate that. Well, we pretend on Instagram. We pretend that we're a good dad or we're a good this or that, and we propagate what Hollywood says a real man is, versus what Scripture says, which is you love till you sacrifice. You build character into your life. You do the right thing even when it's hard. That's what a real man does. And the journey, you don't flip a switch and become full of character, but there's a journey that you enlist in to build more and more and more character, because as you do, you become more Christ-like. And that's the crux and the muscle behind what a real godly man is building character into your life. And, part of what the world says is a man, you don't think about character. You just give in to whatever impulse you have, because I'm free. In the name of quote unquote freedom, you do whatever you have, and whatever you have in front of you, you bite at that thing, or you eat at that thing, or you want that woman, or you want that to watch that thing, and you just go after whatever you crave. Versus, no, a real man builds character, controls his cravings, because they're not all godly. Most of them
That's
are
right.
not godly, and you learn how to master them rather than be mastered by them.
Yeah. Two things I thought of when you were talking right there about, in regards to being manly, being committed and your faithfulness, right? Like commitment and faithfulness, like those are often overlooked as manly traits, but those are, one, they're biblical, but two, like you have to do some enduring and some sacrificing to stay committed and remain faithful to
Right.
something.
Well, and to your wife, to your family, and a guy used to think, "Hey, I'm a good dad because I'm a good provider." Well, there's something more important about being a dad than just providing. Providing, of course,
Yeah.
and for your wife and your children, but that's not the only thing. And so, we make the bar so low.
Right.
Like, of course you need to do that, but what about providing encouragement, emotional strength, an example for your kids and for your wife? What about being there, instead of thinking my job is at my work earning money, her job is to clean the house and clean the kids and make the food and all of that. And there's sort of this paternalistic, like I do my part. When I come home, I want to chill, rather than we are doing life together with our spouse. And so, hey, I help make the babies. I got to help take care of them too, that kind of thing.
That's right.
And it doesn't stop after the bedroom, kind of a thing. And it's part of the joy of parenting when you sacrifice together, because you're changing diapers and your late nights and all of that kind of stuff. But then you see the kids grow up. I will say also that in the name of I want to be a good provider, a lot of times what we do with that as an excuse is we take our work home with us. We work like 24/7. We take calls, and then we never spend time with our kids. Never spend time with our spouse. Well, hey, I'm providing. Aren't you happy? And then, but look what I've done for you. I've got a bigger house. I got a bigger car. Look what I've done. Now I have to keep working like this in order to keep providing, and it becomes the tail wagging the dog rather than, the best thing you could do is shut the phone off, let it go to voicemail, spend time with your kids, spend time with your wife, and be there relationally. They're not going to remember all the stuff, but they'll remember, did you laugh with them? Did you play with them at home? They'll remember, did you go to their games? Were you too busy for all the activities to be there in their life?
Yeah, I would rather my children and my wife be connected to me than connected to what I provided for them. And I think that's imperative. And I think that's a big issue in society today is, man, we become absent fathers even though we are still married.
Right.
And we're still in the home. But we're absent because under the banner of providing, and providing is a noble thing. But like you said, that's kind of like the basic foundation principle of like male leadership in the home.
Right.
Like that's an expectation, right? But there's other things to provide besides just a roof and food and material things, like leadership, spiritual leadership, love, discipline. There's other things that need to be modeled besides just a work ethic to
Right.
provide.
Right. One of the things that I tried to do, we had 3 kids. We still do. They're all young adults now. But is I was always conscious, like, what memory am I putting on their hard drive right now?
Yeah.
Because there's something's going to be on there. Is it going to be when I blew up about something? Or is it going to be I took them to Lowe's because I had to go instead of just going by myself. And then we got a hot dog on the grill on the outside of Lowe's, and we sat there and got mustard all over our face. And what memory are you putting into their hard
Yeah.
drive? Somewhere I learned when my kids were real young, never go to the hardware store by yourself. Never do an errand by yourself. Always use it for an opportunity to take one of your kids and create a memory.
Yeah.
I traveled my kids' whole life every weekend, but I would take one of them with me, and then I'd take Katie, my wife, with me one weekend a month. But whenever they would go with me, we'd always make a memory. We'd go to a children's museum, and when they got older, we'd go to amusement park or whatever during the breaks or whatever. And so always thinking, what am I putting on their hard drive? Because they're going to have something there.
Yeah.
And if I made a mistake, which we all do,
Right.
and like I blew up or something, okay, then I'm thinking, how can I rewrite that hard drive?
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. So we took our kids on a cruise one time, which I really recommend not to do. No, let me tell you why. Because when you think about vacations, because we think they're all the same, they're not. If you like, a cruise is an indulgence. Like, everything's just catered to you, right?
Yes.
If you're just a couple and yourself, okay, that's great. But with your kids, you don't want to feed their indulgence. Everything, it's food, it's this, it's that, and it creates a really carnal kind. Rather than, we started getting smarter later, and let's go do an adventure. Let's go hike somewhere. Let's go Grand Canyon. Let's do something that everybody has to engage, rather than sit back and get their flesh fed. Anyway, so we're on this cruise, and our girls, and they were probably just 12 and 13 at the time. They were supposed to come back to the room at a certain time. I don't remember what it was, 8 o'clock or something. And they didn't come back for like till 9 or 9:30. And Katie and I were out of our mind. Now, where can you go on a boat? Well, the worst thing is you're thinking they could go
Overboard, yeah.
And so they came back late, and I was irate. Katie was self-controlled. I was like, do you know, you're thinking of all the worst things that could happen. They could get captured and abducted and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, they went to bed and all that. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just ruined this whole cruise. I just paid all this money to have a horrible thing on their hard drive. So, so the next day I get up and I'm praying. I'm like, what can I possibly do? I can't even salvage this thing now. We can't even go home early because we're out in the middle of the ocean, whatever. And so I thought, so what we did is I said, listen, girls, I don't really like what happened last night. I'd like to do it over. I want you to go outside the door and act like you're just coming back, and it's 9:30 or whatever at night. So they knock on the door, and I open up the door, and I hugged them, and I grabbed them, and I said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're." And I actually started crying. I said, "I was worried so much about you," and rewrote their hard drive and I could tell them why I was worried and what was so intense. Just express the emotion in a different way. So we do make mistakes, but when we do that, think deeply about how you can rewrite that memory, and so they can see your real desire, your real heart, versus just the anger.
Yeah, I think you tackle something really important with that whole story. First off, I agree with the cruise thing. We did a cruise for the honeymoon, and no offense to my wife, I love her, but she just loves to hang out by the pool. I was like, oh, there's a basketball court. Oh, there's a rock climbing wall. There's something. I was like, all right, next time we do this, we need to bring some people that want to do some of the fun stuff besides hang out by the pool. But after about 12 hours, I was over it. I was like, we need to do something else. But you said something that is huge, because now I have 4, 8, 6, 3, and almost 5 months old. I know what it's like to be tired, get in your flesh, and you're like, that was a little overboard. I need to tone it back a bit. I also come from a long history of demonstrations of parenting skills that I knew I didn't want. Like, I was like, I don't want to be that. That's over the top. That's a little radical. That's too much. Not life-giving, all that good stuff, right? Something I've learned with my older 2 is when that has happened, I will sit down and explain, okay, I was scared, or this or that, like why I was in it, and I will apologize, right? And I think that's often overlooked in men, because we're like, well, I'm the man, whatever, or I missed the boat, I just let it go, and they'll forget about it. But I remember stuff that happened to me when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and I haven't forgot about it, And so the idea of rewriting the hard drive, or at the very least being transparent and honest and asking for forgiveness, I think it's huge. Like, I think it's one, I think it's spiritual leadership. Two, I think it's extremely manly because it's ownership.
Right.
It's ownership.
Right. And humility is godliness. You
Mhm.
know, Jesus was humble, and you could make the argument that God the Father and the Holy Spirit are humble. They defer to one another. You know, they honor each other.
Sure.
They don't honor themselves. And we've got this idea that if you're a real man, you never make mistakes. You don't have to admit you're wrong, and you can't even come to Christ unless you admit you're wrong. Right.
That's right.
And so, if we want our kids to admit when they're wrong, we need to be the ones that cop to it as well.
Demonstrate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing I think is important now that we're kind of down this pathway with kids, something I think will be super cool to talk about. A lot of these guys have already heard this. Their wives have. People in our church have heard me talk about this. Something a couple years ago, Tiffany and I sat down with you and Katie, who is your wife, who's amazing and awesome. And one of the major things that you wanted to talk to us about really wasn't ministry. It was marriage. Hey, man, how are you guys? Because you have, I don't know, a bunch of years in ministry. And one of the things that you've always been talking to me about is, hey, making sure you're in it for the long haul and taking care of things you need to take care of, your marriage being one of them. So you guys sat at our dinner table one night and we talked about our marriage and some of the hiccups and some of the issues we were having. And really, both of you challenged us to prioritize our marriage and be intentional. You introduced us to the 777 plan, right? And you were talking about, hey, you guys have to have time alone. It's going to make you better parents. It's going to make you better pastors. It's just you guys need to make sure you're growing in your love and being intentional, right? And so we've instituted that. And for those of you who are listening, maybe don't know what a 777 plan is. Every 7 days you do a date. Every 7 weeks you do an overnight trip together. Every 7 months you do a significant intentional trip together, right? And so we calendared that, which just putting it on the calendar completely transformed my marriage. Because that's my wife's love language. She knows calendar is king. And when she saw herself on the calendar, she knew that she was thought about, cared about, and it showed intentionality. And so that was huge. But the date night was the first thing we had to tackle. Every 7 days doing an intentional date night with just us. We had chalked it up to, man, we got 3 kids. They're always with us, whatever. We were like, well, we have to take the kids with us. You guys are like, no, you need to be alone. And when we first started it, our kids would be upset and cry when we left. And we would war with it a little bit. But we kept telling ourselves, we got to do this because this is going to be better, because the way we love each other in the home is going to be better for them in the long haul. Good news is, after 2 years of doing this, roughly 2 years, man, they'll still cry and we'll wave bye. We're like, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
You're going to survive. You're not going to die. But it has completely changed our marriage. Like, she feels more cared about. I feel more supported and encouraged. Can you just kind of talk about the 777 plan a little bit?
Sure. Well, let me just speak specifically to the point you just made. So when we first get married, we think that other person is the center of our life, and they are, besides the Lord, right? And in terms of, like, we revolve our whole life around them. Then, because I think it seems logical, once you have kids, now your whole life revolves around the kids, every single moment, every sport, every this, every that.
Yep.
And you think, well, I can't be away from them for a night because our life revolves. And that's actually very unhealthy, because kids are going to grow up, go away.
Yeah.
And that's why people get divorced after their kids grow up, because their whole life resolves so much around their kids that now they have no relationship with each other anymore. And so it's actually unhealthy. And so when your kids see you leaving to go be with her, they know she's the priority and not them. And that's okay. In fact, that's really healthy, So, so we learned it when we were real young. Another couple we're doing something similar. So we're like, hey, we're going to adopt this and tweak it ourselves. And so the idea is, so in ministry, but this can be in any,
No matter what you do.
because all of us guys are driven. Like, we're
Exactly.
success. Every minute of the day, we want to make more money. We want to get the promotion, all that. And that is because guys, our value is mostly it should be because we're a son of God and not because of our performance. But too often we default to our performance.
Yep.
And rather than I'm a son and that's all that matters. And so if you're a performance driven guy, you need to kind of realize that your best identity is you're a son. And you don't need to perform one thing to be a son of God. You just, he's your father. And there's peace in that. However, when we default to the performance thing and the getting the the next whatever promotion, money, whatever, start a new business and this kind of thing, that gives us a sense of worth. Well, our wives, they're at home, or even if they're working, they're kind of feeling the ownership of taking care of the kids. And first of all, the way Katie and I did it was this. Listen, she was a stay-at-home mom. I was working at the ministry, but I told her, I care just as much about the kids as she does, and she cares just as much about the ministry as I do. Mm-hmm. But we just have different roles during the day. But when we're at home at night, we both are engaged in the family, and so we're cooking and we're cleaning up the kids and putting them to bed and whose turn is it and all that kind of stuff. It's not all dumped on her. But when, kind of like what you mentioned about Tiffany, when a woman puts her name on the calendar, that she knows you're busy and you're busy as a family and you're busy as a couple. But when she sees that no matter how busy, you're not ever going to be too busy for each other. Every week, every 7 weeks, and every 7 months. And part of the fun is once you get it on the calendars, hey, where you want to go this time? What do you want to do the next time? And every time you do that, you're ascribing value to both her and to your relationship. So all the guys, and it wasn't so big when Katie and I have been married 37 years. So it wasn't such a big deal when people first, back then, doing the elaborate proposal kind of thing and giving them a story. Now it's a big thing. But you don't want to stop giving them a story on your proposal. That's the problem, like, hey, wasn't that great? Yeah, but that was 10 years ago, bro. You need to give her a story right now to be gushing about, and then next month and then next month, that she always feels cared for. And I think one of the things that men get frustrated with, like if I'm supposed to be the priest in my family, if I'm supposed to be the one spiritually looking over my wife, I don't know what to do. Like, do I just stand there and preach to them? What do I do? Well, let me tell you just some practical things to do. First of all, you care about her emotional, physical health enough to plan time. So you're caring about her. She feels cared for. That's what a pastor is. That's what a shepherd does, cares for the sheep. You're caring for your first sheep. She needs an emotional break from the kids. So once a week, every 7 weeks, every 7 months, you're extracting her from all that business, even if she says she can't. Oh, she can't. The baby's too small. There are people that take care of these things for a living, right? Take care of babies and stuff like that. And so you're caring for her, and you're sending that message. But there are other things you can do as well. I just encourage guys to think like this because, again, it's strange. Here I am so wise. Let me disciple you. That feels weird. It almost feels patronizing, belittling. For sure. But if you said this to your wife, hey, I found this great book. Let's read it together. And after every chapter, let's just talk about it. Well, what you've just done then is you showed her that you cared enough about her that you want to take her down this path. Let's learn together. I'm not saying I'm so wise. I'm saying let's learn together.
Exactly.
She also feels cared for. Like he's putting thought into our marriage. He's putting thought into our relationship and into our family. And so Katie and I have read books from the very beginning. Even before we were married, we read premarital books and how to have a good engagement because what you said. We both had parents that were divorced. We didn't have good examples in front of us. We had to rewrite our own hard drive about what is a healthy marriage, what is a healthy relationship. And so we haven't stopped in different phases of our life. Like when we started having kids, we're like, okay, how do you parent? We're reading those books and talking. And then how do you parent children? How do you parent teenagers? We're reading books and talking about it. We'd read other books as well, but we've constantly been putting more fodder in our mind to talk about. One of the reasons people get divorced is they just get bored. Yeah. The reason they got bored is they stopped learning in life. Well, what happens is we're all learning, and the problem is you don't stop learning. You can stop learning together. So she got really into these podcasts, and I got really into these things, and now you're growing separately.
Yeah.
And we'll all have our own interests and stuff, but as the father or the leader of the home, I think a part of our job is like, hey, here's a book of the Bible, let's read it together. Here's a book about XYZ, let's read it together and then talk about it. And what you're doing just by discussing it, you're putting fresh fodder into your conversation, into your hard drive. Oh, so let's agree we're going to parent like this because we've read this many books. We're going to have this kind of relationship because we read these and heard these podcasts and these teachings and whatever.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're creating a similar hard drive together for common vernacular, common words that you use, common topics. This is how we're choosing the values for our marriage and the values for our family.
And on our date nights, this is where we had conversations about stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the date night keeps you from growing apart because
Mm-hmm.
it causes you to have conversation, and then you got to just put some action to it. And a lot of men, we talked about this on some other podcasts, a lot of men are scared to read. They just don't read. It's like they got out of school and they're just not into reading. That can't be an excuse though, because you can listen to books, you can listen to podcasts, and you can both go after some things together. I think, you talk about being a provider. We talked about it earlier, like men become consumed with providing material things. Man, if we could just shift that mindset a little bit to be able to provide for the longevity of our marriage in the things that actually matter. I'm not, because a lot of people argue with the 777 plan because of, well, that sounds like a lot of money. It's not. It's not. You can do it based off of your budget, but also you could learn to sacrifice in some other areas, like, listen, I know I've had to talk with a guy who has a, who has a hunting camp that he bid on, that he won, that he hunts in all fall, right? Spent thousands of dollars on this to get this spot to hunt. He's like, man, I can't do this 777 plan. Man, it's going to stretch us financially. And I was like, well, just give up your hunting. He was like, yeah, but that's me time. I was like, well, you're going to have a lot of me time when you lose your wife because you're not investing in her.
That's right.
So I hope you got a good hunting stand because you're going to be spending you might be living in it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's like, no, your priorities have to shift. And I tell people too, man, like the marriage is worth fighting for, especially for those of us who follow Jesus, because it's a great demonstration. It's a great picture of the relationship between Jesus and the church.
Right. And plus, if you think it's hard on your budget now, how much is therapy?
And
how
divorce.
much is divorce? That's half all your stuff right there.
Yeah, you're going to lose the hunting camp, bro.
But worse than that, it's not just your stuff. It's like an inconsolable brokenness with your children, and heartache and future, and beating yourself up. All of that, like how much money is that worth, kind of a thing. Yeah. Versus, when you invest in things that you care about, and so you're going to pay. You either pay up front because you're investing, or you pay later because you didn't invest. How much better to invest up front and you get the fruit of that investment? Yeah,
I love that. Just being intentional. And intentionality with our marriage, our life, every area. Christians should definitely be intentional, 100%. The calendar is intentional. At least my wife loves the intentionality. One thing I love about Tiffany, she's a planner. She loves the intentionality. Maybe a lot of guys' wives are that way. What she also loves, though, is the spontaneousness within the calendar. She doesn't care where we're going or what we're doing. She just cares that she's on the calendar and we're doing it together, right? Like I don't care. I'll go wherever. We'll go wherever. Like we don't know, like a lot of date nights we get in the car and we start driving and it's like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And we'll figure that out together. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, this is what we're doing. And she'll be like, okay. She's just excited that we're doing something together. Now, there'll be the occasional time that she's like, hey, can we go do that? And absolutely. But man, like this thing does not have to be like going to the dentist.
Well, and like, for example, to your point, last night I took Katie on a date. We were going to go to dinner and a movie. What we do for dinner, you don't have to think I've got to spend $100 or even $50. Sometimes you do. We just went to a place and got a salad bar. And then it was quick, it was healthy, and then we went to a movie. And so it's more the experience together. So We're sitting outside at this place and we're eating and we're enjoying the weather and we're eating our salad. And then, so thinking that it's too expensive, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Salad bars are not like a lot of money. So.
Let's talk about this on a date night too, because you talk about you two being together and it triggered something. Man, when you're together, man, don't be no need for fantasy football, no need for the ESPN app or social media or any of that. Like, don't let your Apple phone create it be your mistress and create division
Oh
on the
my
date
goodness.
night,
Yeah.
because that's one of Tiffany's favorite things is we don't have a kid tugging on us. We can actually have an adult conversation and we can enjoy stuff together.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, the we've gotten such a distraction culture all the time. You know, and it's diffusing our ability to focus on anything, and so our wives and our kids will feel the brunt of that. Turn off all the alerts on your phone when you go on a date. I mean, I hate alerts anyways,
Right.
stupid app alerts. And I don't care if people, you know, the only things I care about is did I get a call but even on a date, like I'm not answering calls.
Right.
No, don't answer calls. That's where you got a thing that records
Voicemail,
your
man,
right.
yeah.
And yeah, and don't even sit there and look at your phone. Like I know it's kind of like, hey, she is too, I will too. No, you're intentionally saying, let's talk about this, let's talk about that kind of a thing, or let's sit here and talk about nothing until something comes up.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you need to talk about nothing, and then something important comes up, it bubbles up out of that.
I love what you just said too. Even if she's on it, don't do it, because like the passive side of us, the garden Adam side would be like, well, she's on it, I'll be on mine too. Lead by example.
Right.
And that might be exactly what she's waiting on is
Right.
for us to be like, hey. So, and some guys, like it might be difficult for them to engage in conversation. Well, what do we talk about? I don't know. What'd you want to talk about with her before you were married to her?
Right.
What made you want to marry her?
Right.
Well, then start talking about that stuff again.
Right.
You know?
And what did you just read in the book that you're talking about together? And it's not a bad idea, men, to do the same thing with your kids around the dinner table.
Yeah.
Everybody put your phone in the bucket. Everybody put it on silence, because right here
Yeah.
we're not all on our phones. How many times you go into a restaurant and everybody's on their phone around the table? You just
Yeah.
wasted your money. That's what you did, because you could have had a great conversation. And some people start family conversations. It's like you're high and the low for the day. So it's a simple little thing.
Yeah.
Or you bring another. As your kids get older, you bring a question. Maybe it's a moral dilemma question. What would you do if? And then you ask people to kind of, and it provides an opportunity for real conversation about things that matter, rather than, it could be the news, but too often the news today is
Can't trust it.
Well, you can't trust it, and it's more pop culture kinds
Yep.
of stuff. What's this favorite star doing or whatever, versus a principle or a moral dilemma, or maybe here's a scripture. What do you guys think that means? You just throw it out there and let the conversation go wherever it goes, kind of a thing. But if you build a family culture, when we have dinner, phones get shut off and they all get put in the bucket or whatever, then people will get into a rhythm of that and start enjoying telling stories and laughing and things like that.
Yeah. Tiff's really big about not having the TV on during
Yeah.
dinner. And I think it probably came from our conversation with you guys a couple years ago. She does something at our house with the girls, because they're both in school. When they come home, what's your pit? What's your praise?
Yeah.
Right. And it's cool, because then we get to hear about the kids' day. We get to find out what was difficult, but we got to find out what they enjoyed. Maylee's is usually we went outside, and but it's that's good stuff. But it also is creating a culture with our children that says we actually care, and so it's something to be really careful of. Now we're getting low on time, but I want to hit this. I had a thought, didn't prep you for it, wanted to just throw it out there. With all that's been happening in the news with like Russia and Ukraine, and one thing I know about you is you pretty much have been all over. Like you've been to Ukraine and Russia area, right? Like help
Yeah.
with churches and
Oh,
stuff like
yeah.
that there. And I've never been there, but watching all of that and watching it, how it's kind of unfold. The president of Ukraine, one thing I've noticed over the past month is like, man, this guy's like really evolved into like a real celebrity, like a global celebrity, right? And so many people are praising him on, his stance on different things and stuff like that. I had this thought, and I think it's important to maybe talk about this specifically with men. Like this dude has turned into a modern day William Wallace.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's a folk hero as of at the time that we are recording this podcast. We have no idea what could happen in the next coming days or weeks. And so I was looking, I was like, even me, I'm watching, I'm like, man, I'm inspired that we offered him a chopper out. He said, no, I don't want a chopper. Give me guns. I'm here to protect what I believe is ours. Pretty cool, right? But I don't know him. I don't know his character or anything. But anyway, I'm watching this and I'm watching this guy just blow up and just getting millions of followers on Instagram. And he's got a video that comes out like twice a day. You know, he's got an incredible media team. And I'm watching all this and so many people celebrating him. And what I'm seeing in him, I was like, man, you know, this really is like basic foundational biblical man principles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do what Old Testament, do what kings do. Stay
Right.
on the front line of the battle, right? Like I think about David in the spring when kings should have been off at war. He's on the roof looking at Bathsheba, right? And I'm just thinking about like some of the basic bottom foundational leadership principles for a biblical man. Like it's been so foreign to us
Right.
that we've turned this guy into a hero because he's doing some of them and not even realized it. And I'm thinking, man, every single one of us, whether we're the president of Ukraine or just the spiritual leader of our home, we should be staying in the fight. We should be encouraging our people. We should be casting vision. We should be loving people, and leading by example, like in the foxhole with our people.
Right. Right. So last time I was in Ukraine a couple of years ago, I got to interview a former president of the Ukraine who was president the last time Russia invaded.
Oh, wow.
And he actually was a former Baptist pastor who became the president. And he's you look at his face, and I'll show you a picture. He doesn't look very friendly because anyways, it was
Was that because he was a Baptist pastor? Or
No.
I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe or Ukrainian, one or the other, but it was a miracle. Like he is a folk hero because they beat the Russians and they only had 20,000 people in their army.
Wow.
It was like a miracle. And so they're used to miracles over there. But the interesting thing about Zelensky is, he's a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
So the Holocaust came to, they're all Holocaust survivors, or their grandparents or great-grandparents were. So there's something baked into his DNA as a Jew, and the Ukrainians have been really oppressed. When I was there, I was really moved by, because the war has been going on for a while. It's just been on the border, right? And like they're always conscious how many people had died and what's going on the border and this kind of thing, even when I was there. But now, of course, it's gone into the whole country. But I was moved by the resilience and how tough they are. What I was wondering about is, so when Ukraine was a part of USSR, they moved a bunch of Russians in there and got them to intermarry with the Ukrainians to try to breed them out, like literally. So half the country speaks Russian, half speaks Ukrainian, right? So when Putin came in, he thought all the Russian people would be cheering for him with flag, and they're mad at him. They don't want him there, even though they're Russian in heritage, right? Because they feel like it's like Ukraine, leave us alone kind of a thing. But when you see, I think you're right. You see the character of somebody who we refuse to be run over like this. We're going to fight for what we know is ours. We go, oh my gosh, we salute. And we're thinking like every man ought to think like that about his family.
Yeah.
Every man ought to think like that about his own purity. Every man ought to think like that about his wife. I'm going to stand and fight for my family, fight for my children, and fight for my purity. And if we had the kind of courage that Zelensky is showing for our own families, for our own purity, for our own marriages, we'd change the whole world.
100%. Yeah, it's cool. Well, I appreciate you giving us this time.
Sure, man.
I enjoyed it. I'm thankful for you. You were a blessing not only to me, but my family and our church family. And so we appreciate you. And maybe we can do this again sometime in the future.
Men, keep going for it. I know you got an 8-month commitment. Keep going for it. Be the man that you really want to be. Rise up on the inside and be the man of God that the world so desperately need to see people of character in this generation.
That's right. I appreciate it.
Sure, bro.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bold City Podcast. To learn more about us, visit us at boldcity.church or download the Bold City Church app. To support this ministry and help us continue to reach people all around the world, visit boldcity.church/give.